Again, I'm Robert Henderson. I'll be talking about the strategic approach to the asset management system, and I am a transportation solution specialist with the asset and network performance team at Bentley. Um, there we go. So this is the second part of a four-part Tech Talk series that have been developed. All these parts can be watched in isolation. The introduction to asset management was done 2 weeks ago. It's available on demand. It's about 44 minutes long. Today, again, I'll be talking about the strategic approach to that asset management system. And then September 26th, we'll be exploring the benefits of asset management. And then part four is the asset management policy and the strategic decision making to drive performance. So this series of tech talks is educational. It's not product based, so I will not be talking about any of our Bentley products in this presentation. More or less, what asset management is. So today, again, I'll be going through the asset management system, the asset management strategy, and then I'll go through how the strategy drives the asset management plans and how everything needs to align to the organizational objectives. So last Tech Talk, I talked about asset management and introduction and introduced this image, and this really represents the scope of asset management and how it's connected to the organizational strategic plan. So this definition of asset management really represents a significantly greater scope than just maintenance or care of physical assets, and it's closer to that central purpose of an organization. So an asset management system is used to direct, coordinate, and control the asset management activities and provides improved risk control and assures the achievement of asset management objectives on a consistent basis. Now this model here is from ISO 55000. And we need to realize that not all asset management activities can be formalized through an asset management system. And an example would be leadership, culture, motivation, behavior. These all have a significant influence on the achievement of asset management objectives, and these may be managed by an organization using arrangements outside of the asset management system, but there needs to be a connection. So an asset management system will align and integrate with other available management systems in the organization, as mentioned. And the structure of asset management and the system is arranged within the plan, do, check, act framework. So planning is about establishing the asset management strategy, objectives, and plans necessary to deliver results in accordance with the asset management policy, the organization's policy, and the strategic plan. Doing is about establishing the enablers for implementing asset management. An example is asset information management systems. And of course, other necessary requirements like legal requirements and the associated implementation plans. Checking is monitoring and measuring results against asset management policies, strategy objectives, legal or other requirements, and we need to record and report the results so we all have visibility. And the act is taking actions to ensure that the asset management objectives are achieved and to continually improve the asset management system and the asset management performance. So continuous improvement. Now, the asset management system is more than document management or managing assets in isolation. So asset lifecycle information management really requires complex information models that manage much more than documents, drawings, models, projects, change requirements, and asset information. So in order to effectively manage all information types across that asset lifecycle, we need to be able to identify and classify asset information, establish and manage relationships with both structured and unstructured enterprise information, um, control information access and visibility for all the required departments, contractors, and individuals in our organization, present information in context of role, responsibility, or activity, incorporate business behaviors through events and activities, capture the what, but also the why, how, and when information has changed. And we need to create audible records of change to meet governance or regulatory compliance requirements, especially in the transportation industry. So lifecycle information management will enable us to view the information in context, displaying any related information regardless of our starting point, right? So for example, linking documents and projects with the related requirements, or drawings, distribution order, and you know, organizations related to individuals, right? Everything's interconnected. It's a spider web of information. So if we, don't know where we're going, how do we know when we're going to get there, and how do we know what the outcome will be, right? So we need a strategy. And the principles by which the organization intends applying asset management to achieve its organizational objectives should be set out in that asset management policy that I have circled there. The approach to implementing these principles should be documented in the Strategic Asset Management Plan, or the SAMP. The asset management strategy should set out how the asset management policy will be achieved. It it is the coordinating mechanism for ensuring that activities carried out on physical assets are aligned to optimally achieve the organizational strategic plan. This requires a high-level plan or scheme for converting the asset management policy into specific asset management objectives and activity plans across the whole asset portfolio. So the strategic asset management plan should document the relationship between the organizational objectives and the asset management objectives, and should define the framework required to achieve the asset management objectives. So the links between the organizational plan and the SAMP should be two-way, and really should be developed through a repeatable process. So for example, the organizational objectives should not be developed in isolation from the organization's asset management activities, along with the asset capability and performance and the outputs from the asset management activities, because these are key inputs for establishing realistic and achievable organizational objectives. So at a high level, asset management strategy requires the following. They need to be derived from and consistent with the asset management policy and the organizational strategic plan. That's obvious. They need to be consistent with the organizational policies and strategies. They need to clearly identify and consider the requirements of relevant stakeholders. They need to consider the life cycle management requirements of the asset. They need to take into account of asset-related risks, individual assets, and asset system criticalities. They need to clearly identify the functions, the performance, and the condition of existing asset systems and critical assets, our most critical assets. They need to state the desired future functions, performance, and condition of existing and new asset systems and critical assets on timescales aligned to those of the organizational strategic plan. So they need to clearly state the approach and principal methods by which assets and asset systems will be managed. The asset management strategy should describe at a high level the mechanisms for achieving the requirements of the asset management standard throughout the activities of the business, including the methods of prioritization, optimization, sustainability, and risk management. Where appropriate, this should also include reference to required performance and condition requirements for assets, or provide guidance to ensure that these are set out in derived asset management objectives and associated procedures or functional specifications. The strategy should make reference to improvement programs and long-term guidance on continuous improvement. The duration of long term will obviously be dependent on the asset management policy, and that term long term will vary from one organization to another. And in transportation, it could vary between one business unit and another as well. So the strategy is often set out in terms of the major business functions or organizational goals and natural groupings of the asset portfolio, which could be sites, maybe subdivision areas, or business units. And these groupings could also be in terms of logical asset lifecycle phases, ensuring the coordination and alignment of activities, processes, and the enablers. And an enabler is the asset information, for example. So the strategy should influence references to strategic approaches to be adopted to enable the delivery of the asset management policy, such as whole life costing, risk management, and sustainability. This should be, sufficiently detailed to enable they're consistent across the the asset management system and to provide adequate guidance for application through operational documents such as functional policies and the development of appropriate improvement initiatives. The strategy should be realistic, well thought out, appropriately detailed, and it should take account of all the views of all relevant stakeholders. And failure to do this could lead to unnecessary or inappropriate work being done, or a failure to meet the key business objectives because there's a lack of alignment. When establishing and reviewing um, its asset management strategy, an organization should ensure that it is, derived from and consistent with its asset management policy, organizational strategic plan, and other organizational strategies on top of that. And the asset management strategy should demonstrate how the asset management policy is to be implemented and how it will support that strategic plan. So I've thrown up a business strategy, a generic one here, and it reads to improve the current profit before tax by 15% within a period of 3 years through expanding capacity to meet the predicted 10% increase customer demand funded through private finance, which will be repaid through future profits. And this could be financed through other sources too, public funds maybe in transportation. But the corresponding asset management strategy here is, well, uh, we're going to upgrade, right? We're to upgrade the core infrastructure to meet the increased demand, that increased demand of 10%. We're going to do this by effectively investing up to X amount of millions of dollars investment over the next 5 years and development and implementation of the optimal operating and maintenance strategy, right? So we have an alignment to that business strategy. So the asset management objectives, when we look at that, um, they're derived and they're part of that SAMP, the strategic asset management plan. So they provide the essential link between the organizational objectives and the asset management plans that are described, how these objectives are going to actually be achieved. So the asset management objectives transform the required outcomes to be provided by the assets into activities typically described in the asset management plan. So the asset management objective should be tailored to suit each organization's needs, which may include addressing subsets of objectives and can vary for different functions carried out to meet stakeholder requirements. So the organization should consider information or data from sources both internal and external to the organization, including contractors, key suppliers, um, regulators and other stakeholders that would affect it. So asset management objectives should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, and that's that SMART model on the screen there. So they can be both, quantitative measurements. This could be mean time before or between failure or mean kilometer between failure. And they could be qualitative measurements such as customer satisfaction. So the organization should consider the monitoring, measuring, and analyzing and evaluating needed to really drive and support its decision making on improvement actions. When deciding what to measure, how to measure, what to analyze, it is important for the organization to understand what type of behavior and actions it wants to achieve from the asset management objectives before actually implementing them. So also, when we look at the asset management objective implementation considerations, again, we need measurable objectives and objectives that are derived and aligned with the organizational objectives. During the establishment of the asset management objectives, consultation with those most likely to be affected should assist in ensuring that the objectives are reasonable and that they are accepted when they're implemented. So care should be taken to basically not setting asset management objectives without due consideration of the cost as well. So including lost income of achieving the objectives. It's an investment. So potential conflict between objectives should also be identified and resolved. This will involve consideration of the business impact for each objective and optimization to determine the best value um, in combination with its achievements. So the following here provides an example of two asset management related objectives developed within the same organization, right? So we have the higher level business objective here to satisfy a 10% demand growth within 3 years and provide a minimum 15% return on investment without, of course, compromising health and safety. Health and safety is extremely important in the transportation industry. So how are we going to achieve this? Here's a operational strategic objective. It's related to rail, so timetables that will deliver a train every 5 minutes in central areas and every 10 minutes elsewhere all day, every day. So let's take that. So without clearly defined organizational strategic plans and the associated asset management policy, strategy, and objectives, it's really difficult to set appropriate realistic performance condition targets for the assets. So asset performance and condition targets can be measured by service, supply standards, levels of service versus supply, reliability, availability, maintainability, RAM, functionality, survivability, capacity, output quantity, output quality, customer satisfaction, safety and or environmental impacts, and of course legislative, regulatory or statutory compliance requirements, or a combination of all these that I've listed on the screen. So care should be taken in defining performance targets that focus on isolated aspects of performance. So many of the potential metrics for an asset management system refer to interrelated behaviors of the system whose net effects should be addressed using a holistic approach. So poor definition of performance targets might encourage individual activities to be managed in isolation without consideration of their impact on the overall system and its performance and to the overall loss of the organization. And an example, an easy example is, a target focused solely on maintenance expenditure. This might encourage our efforts to reduce that cost without due regard to the impact on the organization that might arise from the resulting increase in failures and downtime as a result of that maintenance budget disappearing. So where possible, this should be addressed by defining performance targets in the form of ratios such as cost of maintenance per unit of production or uptime or service or income. So the essence and the challenge of asset management is to align the performance of the assets with the organizational strategic plan. So in order to achieve this, the objectives have to be translated into practical targets and measures for the assets. So the following provides an example here. So that timetables example, so timetables that deliver a train every 5 minutes in central areas and every 10 minutes elsewhere, all day, every day. So achieving this objective would require a certain number of trains within a specified level of availability, a specified level of availability of the infrastructure systems, including track, signals, power, and routes, scheduling systems and resources to ensure appropriate operators, train dispatch, and timing control. So the optimum level of availability for such a complex system could be best determined through simulation modeling. The output of such modeling would provide optimum availability targets for individual components, the train, the track, the signals, and for the system as a whole. So the output of such an analysis would be the performance target for a component asset system and might be similar to maybe this specific activity to achieve an average of 97% system availability en route, right? So we're driving down and starting to get into the weeds now. So asset management plans provide the direction to and expectations for an individual asset or for a portfolio or group or class of assets. So an organization's asset management planning processes will provide asset management plans that define the activities that an organization intends to undertake in order to deliver these objectives. These activities could include capital investment to build new assets, capital investment to renew life expired assets, an optimal maintenance routine, disposal of assets, and we would also want to bring in some educational campaigns as well if we're doing any change. So asset management planning is undertaken to determine how assets will be managed over a specific period of time to achieve the asset management objectives in accordance with the asset management strategy. I said that before. For example, this could be to maintain current customer service or to improve customer service or environmental service in specific areas for a given level of funding. So in the asset management plan, responsibilities should be set out, who leads each activity and which part of the organization or suppliers will carry out each activity. The resources needed to deliver each activity should be identified, and this may include human, financial, physical, natural, and knowledge resources. The plans may also specify how the plan will be funded. For example, maybe from it's government, it's public money, it's government funded. Maybe it's coming from shareholders. Maybe we're borrowing. Maybe we're changing our income model and we're changing the charges on our customers. So within the asset management plans, each activity should have a time scale to describe when it will be delivered and when the benefits will be achieved. The asset management plan may also describe how the plan has been justified and how activities and resources have been optimized to deliver the lowest whole life cost or value for our individual assets or grouping of assets across our network. The justification describes the cost and benefits associated with delivering the asset management objective. So also asset management plans may also include information on current assets and their performance, on stakeholders' engagement, and how the plan will be approved, monitored, reviewed, and updated for continuous improvement. So an asset management plan provides the direction to and the expectations for an individual asset or that portfolio of assets that I talked about, a grouping of assets, a network of assets. How is a subdivision performing? So the organization shall ensure that the asset management plans take into account relevant requirements from outside the asset management system. When planning how to achieve its asset management objectives, we need the organization to determine and document the following things on the screen here. So the method and criteria for decision making, process of managing assets over the life cycle, what will be done and how, what resources will be required for success, who is responsible, who has responsibility for delivering the management plans. This should be clearly identified. Many organizations define this responsibility within job descriptions, of course, while some others include, specifications of responsibility for delivering the asset management plan with the plan itself and a clear timeline with the objectives and when they will be completed. So the appropriate time horizon needs to be clear, visible to everyone. We need to provide not only for the allocation of the appropriate responsibility and authority of each task, but also allocate timescales for each individual task in order to meet the overall timescale of the relevant asset management objectives. We should also provide the allocation of suitable resources, again, financial, human, equipment, logistics, for each task. So everyone needs to understand how the results will be evaluated, financial, non-financial implications for the asset management plan need to be understood, and we need to clearly address the appropriate risks and opportunities in accordance to the organization's success. So failure to consider the full impact of asset management decisions can have adverse effects, and anyone in asset management understands this. So an asset management plan should be documented at the level that is appropriate to the organization and degree of sophistication in its asset management approach. So there's no set formula for what should be included or how it should be structured. There's no magic bullet to solve your problem. However, it is common practice for such an asset management plan to contain a rationale for asset management activities. So operational and maintenance plans, capital investment including overhaul, renewal, replacement, and enhancement, and financial and resource plans. We need them to be, based on a review and based on previous methods of organizational achievement, and then have a system in place where we can continuously improve those plans. So one little thing about an asset management system in transportation, I just want to highlight the fact that an asset management system isn't a single solution. It's multiple solutions, it's multiple vendors, and it's interconnected with systems outside of that asset management system. So there needs to be an understanding that asset management and its system isn't that single solution, right? So transportation requirements with linear assets are a great example of why we need different types of tools in our organization. And that linear asset could be a road network or a rail network, for instance, in transportation. So if I use rail as an example, when we look at a car, a rail car, we're using a hierarchy system, and this could be a bus, and a car has bogies. The bogies have wheel sets have wheels, and we typically maintain the assets at the level which we define them. So if we have an asset registry that has a wheel, we define attributes associated with the wheel set. We can drive these requirements from our asset performance management tools. When we look at a linear network and the related assets, there is a long continuous asset, which could be the track or the uh, roadway. The relationships are based on a linear referencing system. Terms like near to or overlapping are used. Critically, organizations do not maintain the entire asset at the same time, and organizations don't renew the asset at the same time as well. So maintenance occurs on parts of the asset, which means that over time it becomes very difficult to understand how our asset got in the condition it is in. And the challenge really is understanding the linear assets usage over time, the deterioration over time, and the maintenance over time. So we found that um, um, we need specific tools to manage different types of assets as well, to understand the history of maintenance in the areas and understand the conditions so we can predict of when or forecast of when we're going to have a potential failure in the future so we can optimize our maintenance procedures. So that is the asset management system. So it's really going to ensure that we do the right work in the right place at the right time. And it's really about learning from the past. So clearly see repeated faults and maintenance activities, analyze them, find the root cause, and eliminate repeated faults to reduce the operation cost. Discover unnecessary maintenance activities. Did the plan maintenance actually result in the condition of the asset improving? Did the planned maintenance reduce the deterioration rate? Find ineffective maintenance and remove it from your procedure. So it's learning from the past is a key component to asset reliability. And when we learn from the past, we can then optimize our present, right? Support the process review, empower the decision maker with trusted data to make informed decisions by understanding the current state of the asset, clearly see the work history along with your linear asset, um, assess new approaches while finding root cause to problems, support process change, which is done through condition and criticality based information, while learning from the past to make the right decisions in the current moment while assessing the process of change in real time. And of course, where we all want to be is we want to be able to plan for the future, optimize our maintenance, um, um, forecast the state year over year, clearly visible conditions with threshold exceedancies and theoretical conclusions to support the decision-making process. So clearly see what maintenance or renewal systems have worked in the past, what wasn't successful, propose new work on validated data that is configured to clearly see what the data represents, the condition the asset's in, and then analyze the next steps that need to be done based on past experience and clearly defined thresholds based on current deterioration rates. So I wanted to go through, I guess, how asset management systems support rail and road, and I've taken the same exact example that was given through this presentation to satisfy a 10% demand growth within 3 years to provide a minimum 15% return on investment without compromising health and safety. We went through this example through the presentation, but there could be other types of um, activities we could do to obtain that timetable every 5 minutes in central areas and every 10 minutes elsewhere. So if we just take that away and say, well, maybe we can increase capacity by increasing the train speeds by upgrading the signaling system, right? So um, Do we know what signaling system we have in place? Do we know what processors we have in place? Do we know what software is at each site location for control points? If we don't, that's a problem, right? And that is actually a very common thing that owner operators don't know what's actually on site. Over and above that, does the civil design even support the um, increases in speeds? Does that cant or the radius of the curve support that, right? If we increase capacity by simply just increasing the train size, well, let's just add more cars. This actually changes our predictive track modeling on railway. So that will change our forecasting and what will happen with future maintenance because now there's increased tonnages on our network. Well, maybe we can just add another corridor to the railway system. Okay, well, what land do we have and what land would we need to acquire? And is this even feasible, right? And if we can't see that, we can't see the cost benefit analysis for all our scenarios, right? So I'm going to take the same exact example, right? And I'm going to talk about roads, and I've put in some fictitious stuff here, basically to satisfy 10% demand growth within 3 years to provide a minimum 15% return on investment without compromising health and safety. Right. So, okay, I'm going to say we're going to try to increase traffic volumes to deliver a 30% increase for maximization of the current road system or build off the current road system during rush hour traffic. Right? Rush hour traffic is always a problem. So maybe we can do this through a route by synchronization of the road signaling system. So again, this gets into configuration management. What's actually there? What software versions there? Can we even do this? Um, and then, well, maybe we can increase capacity by having, dedicated bus routes or adding an LRT line. What's the cost of that? What's future maintenance procedures? And again, if we start adding locomotives, how does that change the fleet management, right? So now we're managing buses and locomotives. And maybe we can just add more lanes, right? And a brand new bus lane or a carpool lane. Again, this gets into, well, what land do I have? What land do I need to acquire? Is this even feasible, right? Real estate is expensive. And again, can I see the cost benefit analysis for all these scenarios? So again, I've taken the same organizational goal and then applied it to rail or road, and how I just tried to put in different examples of different pathways we can get there. So I'm going to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy day to watch this presentation. So if you want to send me a direct email, my email is up on the screen. I am also on LinkedIn, and I tend to post articles sometimes, or I share information or make announcements. So if you're interested in connecting with me, feel free to reach out to me.